Cathy Levitas. I am a member of the Faith Formation Committee, and our committee over the last couple months, after missing, so much of our church family and really not being able to be in church that often over the last year with this pandemic, we just thought it might be a really interesting activity to talk to people about their faith journeys. And everybody has a different faith journey, and we're just really fascinated by some of the conversations we've had in our committee, and we'd like to hear from other people in our congregation. So Julie Courtney is the person I'm going to interview today. And this is just something that we hope other people will be willing to sit down and talk with some of us from the Faith Formation Committee, so we can just get to know each other better and share some of our own experiences with God in our lives. So Julie, tell us a little bit about yourself and your family. Like, did you attend church as a child, or, with whom, what denomination?
Sure, Kathy. I grew up in a large family, 3 brothers, 3 sisters. My parents, we lived on a farm in Northwest Ohio, and we attended a very small rural Presbyterian church that was yoked with another Presbyterian church about 20 miles away. So we shared a pastor. I grew up going to Sunday school, church, youth group. Throughout my whole life, I was married in that small church. And when we go back to visit family, we make sure we go to church there on Sunday mornings. Although a lot of our members have passed on, but still there are people that we know and care about dearly there. So I've had a family church experience my whole life, and I've had some other faith experiences that have been interesting, in that I had a Pentecostal great-grandmother who prayed for us daily and lived with us periodically through our growing up years, parts of the year. And she was very strong in her faith and encouraged us as well. And our family also attended a family church camp for a number of years up in Michigan, where we had some probably really good spiritual experiences there as well.
That's neat. So when did you start attending First Presbyterian?
Well, Bob and I were married in 1978 and moved back to Cumberland. And of course, this being his home church where he grew up, and being Presbyterian myself, it just made sense to attend First Presbyterian Church here in Cumberland. So we started as a couple attending in 1978 after we got back from our honeymoon.
Wow, that's a long time. And I know you've had 3 children who've been raised in this church as well. So when you think about it, what were your initial thoughts about our church, about First Presbyterian? You were a lifelong Presbyterian, so this was, somewhat familiar, I guess, but what did you think initially?
Well, I will be honest, it was a very different culture for me. Growing up in a very small rural church where everybody knew everybody, knew everybody's names, all the birthdays, the whole gamut. To come to a much more formal church when I started attending, it was there were people had their own little organizations, whether it was women's circles or just different groups. It was kind of foreign in a way for me to come to our church, and it took a little while for me to feel comfortable.
That's interesting. So, we know that faith is something that develops over a lifetime. So can you tell us a little bit about your own faith journey up to this point in your life?
Well, like I had said, being involved in church from the time we were little, and our family also, we had family prayers, we had devotions at home. One of the things that as kids we probably gave our parents a hard time about was that my mom was very musical, and she would have us go and sing at other churches sometimes, which I think we probably were somewhat embarrassed about, but we did love to sing, and we still enjoy making music together as a family. I attended a child evangelism crusade in 3rd grade, and that's where I accepted Jesus as my Savior. That was, I remember that very specifically, and I would say that was probably part of the start of my faith journey. I did confirmation class as a freshman in high school. And what was interesting is our parents didn't have us baptized, although that's traditional for infant baptism in the Presbyterian Church, but felt that we should make our own decision. So I was baptized at the end of confirmation as part of that process. So I do remember as well.
That was a typical thing to do in your church, or is that more unique to your parents?
More unique to my parents, I guess.
Interesting. So how about, continue on from there? What were, what else with your faith journey?
I think it was interesting in college. I did not attend church, but I read through the Bible. So it was, I don't know why, because that's always been a part of my makeup. Maybe it was my rebellious years,
Right.
But interestingly, Bob and I both attended the College of Worcester, which is Presbyterian related. And he attended their church that was on campus and sang in their church choir. And so when we came back to Cumberland after getting married and came to church, he said, "We're joining the choir." So we weren't asked. He said, "We're joining the choir." So that was probably my first really group of support people as choir members, although we were probably the youngsters at the time. Makes me think of the Kayla and Zach a little bit.
Right.
And he said, "I think we should help with the youth group." So then we started volunteering, helping with youth activities, and became very good friends with our assistant pastor at the time and his wife, Doug and Luann Noggle. And through them became good friends with John and Becky Nelson. He was the Presbyterian pastor at Frostburg Presbyterian Church. And then another couple in the church at the time, Rick and Peggy New. And they were a little older than us and had a couple kids. But we formed a little Bible study and kept that going for several years. And we also had Tuesday night dinners where we would just call up and say, "Hey, what's everybody doing? We're going to go somewhere, we're going to eat." So we had a lovely friendship that still continues to this day, even though we're all spread out all over the place.
Different time than, now, but still. And I don't recognize really any of those names. And we've been members of the church for 25 plus, more than like 28 years. So that's interesting. So if you could pass some spiritual advice onto yourself, like as a younger version of yourself, what would it be? Or if that's kind of a weird question, what about passing along some spiritual advice to the congregation?
I think reaching out to others and being bold enough to invite them to participate in something at our church would be a really good point. I think I was kind of hesitant, and I didn't really, I would participate, but not reach out at that point in time, where I think I would have had some better experiences being a little more bold, because, I had a strong faith, but I was just, a little shy maybe about it. So that's something. And also just being willing to serve, if you're asked to do something, it's like, go for it.
Yeah, I think that's really how you get to know people too, by being involved, doing something together. So can you describe a time or an experience when you felt God's hand on your shoulder, so to speak, or when you felt God leading you?
Yeah, I was always wanting to join a group, within our church, like have someone ask me, just come and be part of our group. And um, there were a couple different, I participated in things, but I wanted to be in a Bible study. And I kind of mentioned that. And then all of a sudden, instead of someone saying, well, hey, come join our Bible study, I actually had about 5 or 6 women saying, oh, I hear you're starting a Bible study. I want to join your Bible study. So all of a sudden I became a leader of a Bible study, which was really quite fascinating because it wasn't all members of our church, and included some different perspectives, but it really, that was God talking to me right there. It's like, no, I don't want you to join something. I want you to lead something. So
Right,
it
right.
it was really, I think that was one specific time I really felt God's hand on me.
That's interesting. Be careful what you want or wish for sometimes. Can you think of somebody when you were first coming to, First Presbyterian, maybe somebody who really welcomed you to the church? You mentioned some couples, obviously, that you met,
Um, yeah, I was
and one of them, I
thinking,
guess, was the Frostberg couple. But is there anybody in particular who you kind of remember welcoming?
well, I think within the choir, people would remember Joyce Macy. She always made me feel welcome within the choir and within things. And of course, she knew Bob growing up because he was the same age as a couple of her girls. Um, but just she was someone who was very gracious to me. And then, of course, my friend Luann Noggle, who invited me to participate in women's circle that I became a part of, the Mary Martha Circle, which and that whole thing has changed so much because at that time when we first joined, I don't think any women had been on session. And
Oh,
maybe shortly after that, Mildred Ransom became the first woman to be on session.
hmm.
But at that time, the women's circles were the way that women participated in activities. And I think there was even a group that started the Mothers Morning Out, which
Hmm.
eventually became Learning Tree, which we still have
Oh,
today.
wow.
So
Hmm.
it's been a lot of changes through the years as I look back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I feel like I had much more different experiences than you, but similar at the same time. So, we all feel like we kind of know each other, especially when we were back in church and seeing each other on a fairly regular basis. But can you think of an experience that you've had that maybe other church members haven't had?
Well, this is not really a church experience, but it's a fun experience. And I would just challenge anyone to tell me that they've also had this experience. I've had a hummingbird land on my finger.
Oh, wow.
That was like a close up of nature. I love being out in nature, and that was extremely fun experience.
How did that happen?
Well, I, there was help. We were on um, a family reunion out in Colorado, way up on a mesa, and the caretaker caretakers of this church camp that we stayed at, we rented as a family. She every morning would bring out bird feeders for the hummingbirds. She would take them in at night so the bears didn't get them.
Mhm.
But she told us if you will put your hands around the bottom of the base of the feeder, the birds will light on your hand and feed from the feeder. And so we all got a turn of that. I have pictures of my son Josh and my daughter Melissa, both with hummingbirds on their fingers. It was very exciting.
Wow. That's really
So
exciting.
tiny.
I love them. They're one of my favorite birds. Well, Julie, I really appreciate your talking with me. And, I hope that we can encourage other people to have conversations like we've had. I mean, it's been hard missing people. We can do Zoom and we can see each other on the computer screen, but it's not the same. And it's even our interview right now is on the computer screen. But, hopefully as we get to know each other better when we come back, I think it's going to make our reunions all the more poignant to really have just more understanding of what each of us has been through in our lives. So thank you for talking with me, and hopefully we'll have some other people that we can get to know better too.
Yeah, and I just end on one activity that I have found so meaningful in the mission area, and that is participating in work camps, both locally and away from the area. And we started back when we were youth advisors, taking kids down to various places on the East Coast for work camps, and then having a couple of adult work camps in the last few years, which Bob said, I'm ready for the next one. So it's really important to be able to find ways that you can serve. And I think God leads us in those special ways. I'm happy that we could talk today, Cathy. Thank you.
Me too. All right. See you in church.